pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and that brings us to communications. If we have citizens' comments for this evening. No citizens' comments? All right, if we could have a roll call, please, Kate.
Jamie Allen.
Here.
Ryan Flynn.
Here.
Chris Perkins.
Here.
Keith Ragenberg.
Here.
Keith Slusser.
Here.
Lindsey Spencer.
Here.
Carrie Trosser.
Here. All right, if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as outlined.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that moves us into the superintendent's report.
I am making the recommendation that we would table the first two items on those and revisit those at a later date.
Okay.
I make a motion to table items A and B of the superintendent's report to a later date.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
All right, next up we have our yearly umbrella insurance policy from music. Matt, do you want to speak briefly to that?
So each year we have an umbrella policy that is presented. Typically we try to receive that present as part of our general liability package. We did receive that earlier this month. We are asking for approval. This is an amount that acts above and beyond our general liability and all other insurance packages. And this is on a per occurrence basis.
I move that we approve the payment of the umbrella policy as outlined.
Second.
Discussion?
Is this in line with what we've had in the past, Matt? There's
This
nothing.
is exactly the same policy that we've had in years past.
Got it.
So this is solely the renewal with music.
Thank you.
Right, any other questions for Matt? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, next up we have invited Dr. Ayat to speak. We've had ongoing conversations with the Clayton School District, and this evening we'd like to talk to you about a cooperative of our football programs that we are going to ultimately ask for action from the board this evening.
So any of you who've been around Brentwood football know that we have a fantastic tradition, but we've kind of been running into the same issues that they're running into all over the country. I was actually at an AD meeting today in the state of Missouri. The number of schools playing football has declined every single year for the last 10 years. It's a little more difficult to get kids to come out, and with our declining enrollment, it's kind of made it to the point where we have to consider working with another school, or else we could possibly lose the sport that we've had some fantastic tradition basically for the last 75 years. So I wanted to just go through a couple of points as to why Clayton. Clayton approached us with their desire to be in a cooperative agreement as well, so it kind of fits the needs. And when you have a co-op, you need to have something that's benefits both schools, or else why would the one that doesn't benefit, why would they even decide to do that in the first place? Clayton has not had enough players for the last 6 or 7 years to have 2 levels, and it has really hurt their program. When I say 2 levels, a JV and varsity level, they've had declining interest, and their number of players has been somewhere between 25 and 30 on a yearly basis. Now, on a Class 1 situation, if we had 25 or 30, that would be fantastic. But this past year, even though we were successful at 10-2, we regularly played with about 18 kids that were dressed out. And with 18 kids that are dressed out 9 through 12, that makes it very, very difficult, especially on those younger kids that are pretty much told that they have to contribute pretty much before they're ready. We lose quite a few seniors this year. Best projections, we would have about 11 or 12 returning players next year, adding in the 8th graders coming up. So with both schools having needs for enough, we got together and we talked and we decided, you know what, if the two schools combined had about 40 players, what you then have is you have enough for the younger kids, this is a safety, for the younger kids, the 9th graders and 10th graders to be able to play a JV schedule, learn at the proper pace, play against kids their size. Very difficult for a 14-year-old boy to go up against an 18-year-old boy who's been in the program for a while. So they're able to play against kids at the same level. Then we can have a varsity program with 20, 24 players. And that would be more than enough to be able to survive. This is pretty much the one way that I think football here in Brentwood is going to survive. The hope is for both schools to increase their program, increase their numbers to the point where you can get back to doing it yourself. Co-op is a year-to-year agreement with the Missouri State High School Athletics Association. So every year, once the boards of both school districts approve it, it's a year-to-year basis to decide whether or not you want to co-op. Our desire is to co-op for next year. Again, if we don't co-op with somebody for next year, I'm not positive we would have enough players to be able to field the team. If anyone's heard of 8-man football, the state does have 8-man football. The nearest 8-man team is probably more than 2 hours away from here. So figure that if we were to move down to an 8-man schedule, we would have to go more than 2 hours every single time we played another team. There's a lot of other benefits too. We've been looking for ways with our small school to be able to combine with other schools for mixers, for other events that can get our kids to kind of interact and mix with schools around in the area. I think this offers a fantastic opportunity for them. Some of the considerations that we've already gone through, thinking for the co-op, it will be a unified program. One of the things we met with the principals, superintendents, and the athletic directors for both school districts. We don't want this to be Clayton's football program and Brentwood kids coming there, or vice versa. It is a unified new program, one single program. So with that, we would be looking to have one single logo, a different logo for the kids, some new uniforms for them, something that basically says, we're not dressing up in Clayton's uniforms. This is not a couple of Brentwood kids coming over there, but it's a new unified football program. Would be good for better utilization of our resources, both physical and human. Our human resources, our scoreboard operator has been doing it for 20 years. They need a scoreboard operator. Their announcer has been doing it for years. Our announcer is stepping away because it doesn't have any more kids coming through the district. There's little things like that just kind of mesh. It's like two cogs meshing very well. Also, there's improved equipment. Clayton, in thinking forward, had purchased 60 helmets that have the new concussion sensors in it. So basically, whenever a player is hit with a certain impact in a certain area, it signals the athletic trainer, it signals the coaches, lets them know. Kid is immediately pulled out of the practice or the contest to be then evaluated. It's fantastic. We would have to be getting to that point as well. With them having 60 helmets and not having anywhere near 60 kids, we'd be able to distribute that equipment to everybody at no cost for Brentwood at all. The game and practice locations, people always want to know about that. Practices would generally be at Gay Field in Clayton. The reason for that is they have on-site weight facilities, on-site storage facilities, and they could practice on a regulation football field. We have been practicing for the last 2 years over at Mark Twain on the old field hockey field. That's been difficult. Mount Calvary is not really an option any longer. So it really makes sense to practice there. The games, though, would be distributed between the two schools. So we would make sure that, and there are 6 home games next year, we would make sure that we would have at least 2 home games here in Brentwood. So we just distribute it between the two. Transportation, Dr. Lane has already spoken with Vic. We've got a tentative agreement to be able to utilize Vic's transportation that picks up Clayton kids after school, would swing by Brentwood first to pick up any of our football players that would need a ride, take them to Clayton, and then it would pick up their kids after school. They have a very similar time that we do for letting out of school. Other programs affected, we've already had initial talks with our band, our cheer, our athletic trainers to know how to combine and utilize those. No decisions have been made on any of those because we're waiting for board approval and mission approval to move forward. Classification's another thing that meshes. Clayton's classification is low on the class 4, so adding our enrollment actually keeps us in the same, we don't even move out of that class. So it doesn't change the class they're in, except the football program as a whole.
Side note, that's the issue. A lot of times we'll have great ideas for cooperatives, but if it's gonna push another school into, going from a class 4 to a class 5 is huge.
Right.
And generally, well, they don't wanna do it, so this was just, it worked out really good on the enrollment
Went
side.
very, very well. And we would generally take their conference schedule, which we don't have a conference schedule because we're not in a conference, and then we would work between the two schools to work with the non-conference schedule to each have to figure out who we would utilize for the remainder of the schedule. We would make sure that communication focuses on the fact that this is a unified program, that this is something that's together in one program is really the emphasis that we're trying to make. And with that, one of the first things that we would do once we got approval is work on the coaching staff, because that will set the tone for kids at both schools to make sure that that's the emphasis for the kids at both. I hear horror stories at other co-ops where they just kind of feel like they're coming over and they're not part of the program. We've already seen those mistakes at other programs and looking to avoid that. And they're actually very interested in our coaching staff as well. The coaches actually know each other from the two schools, so then there's a good relationship, so we're in pretty good shape for that. Timeline for the agreement, they'll go to their board February 1st. We're looking, as soon as we have board approval from both, we'll immediately put in the application to MISHA for the co-op so that we can start the process in February, putting the two programs together.
So is this just you, I'm sorry.
How about if we do a motion to,
So do we
Or
actually
Jamie.
are voting on?
yes.
So I move that we approve moving forward with the co-op with Clayton as outlined.
I'll second.
Discussion?
So, I don't feel comfortable voting yet until we know how this will affect our band, cheer, and athletic trainers. I think we need to know, we have a huge band program here that the kids really, really love. So I think I'd like to know more about how is it going to affect us? Is it gonna kind of be like you said? Another thing is I think this was a great venture. We did that with swimming. I like that we're gonna have unified uniforms, we're gonna have transportation. There were some things lacking in some of the co-ops we've done right now. What are we going to do? Since I've been in Brentwood, there's always been a bad taste in some people's mouth that the football department gets favoritism. What if we have the same issue in volleyball? What if we have the same issue in basketball? I'd like to see if we can look at numbers and see if we are going to have these issues in other sports so that we make sure that we are looking at all of the kids and all of the sports and seeing if this is something we can do with Clayton with all of our sports before we also make a decision to just go with this and then have one of those teams not be able to make it and we've approved this.
Are you asking, would this co-op decrease enrollment in other sports?
No, I'm saying, have you only talked about a co-op on football? Or have we talked about sports in general, is my first question, and then what
With
do you-
Clayton specifically.
with Clayton specifically, and then what do you see, or what are some of the facts that are being talked about regarding band, cheer, and trainers?
We have not talked about other sports at current with Clayton, because at this point, football is the one of concern for the declining enrollment and not having that. We've looked into co-ops, like you mentioned, we've looked into co-ops in other sports when the enrollment has declined to the point where we needed to do that.
Well, and also, to be fair, Clayton's interest was in football. That's their declining numbers. They're not speaking to decline in their other.
Right, I mean, like I said, I think this is great. I'm just being a devil's advocate because we're
Sure.
gonna have people who are gonna be asking those questions as soon as we do this. So I'm just
Yeah, we would
curious.
certainly, anytime we have a significant
Right.
decline over time, I think that's part of it too. With our size, and Steve can talk to this better than I can, I mean, we have soccer goes up and volleyball goes down, and then 2 years later, softball's back up, and so we're used to some of that, but, football nationally, we know what trend that is on, so that was certainly part of it, is that, that need is not gonna go away. I don't predict in 5 years that football numbers are gonna be back up. It's just we all know it's dealing with safety and concussion protocols and things of that nature.
Sorry, maybe it kind of related. So you're saying, softball, for example, I don't know, we didn't have softball. I'm using it as an example, is it standard practice, so just to take it on a sport by sport, year by year basis with this co-op?
Yes.
So it's not, you don't typically see, hey, let's go talk about 6 sports,
Typically, no. You see it on a singular sport basis. Softball would be a good example. If we continue to have interest in softball, we can continue to look at
Got
other
it.
possibilities,
Got it.
co-ops for softball. I have had schools who are possibly interested in that. That is a less difficult sport to combine.
Yeah,
So if we go into the spring and we don't have the enrollment for that, we can still co-op with somebody, and I would be coming back to you and saying, hey, we don't have the enrollment for that. Softball has actually gotten to the point where I'm not sure we're
We
gonna
have
have
enough.
more than 1 or 2, because there's not legitimate feeder programs within the area. We had softball up for a few years, when we had 4 kids who were softball players. As soon as the softball players moved on and graduated, very similar to, like you said, the ups and downs, has gone down to the point that there aren't kids who are asking for it at this point. But I would do that with any sport. That's what we've done throughout my tenure here, is when there's a need for a sport, we look into what we can do to fill that need. You'd asked about band and cheer. We have already spoken to the band directors that are already together on this. Both bands do very similar to what we do on game day, where they haul their equipment out. They don't have a marching band. They don't have a marching band, we don't have a marching band. At minimum, it would be each band doing home contests, but both band directors are looking into, can we combine that? It becomes a little more difficult with equipment and moving the equipment back and forth, but I think they're both confident that they can do that. Cheer program's similar. Both cheer squads would be at every contest, and they would learn new cheers to go along with that. In the fall, they only have football as their only cheer program at both schools, so because of that, they can concentrate basically on cheering for this program, not Brentwood only or Clayton only, but for this program.
So with this program, are you also incorporating, what is the cost for, cheerleading uniforms and everything else that it entails combining these 2 programs together
Yeah,
into one brand, if you will?
What the main cost will be the small transportation cost and cost for uniforms. Equipment is not necessary. We have enough equipment for that. Putting the programs together isn't really a cost. The number of coaches being covered by both schools really wouldn't change. So you're talking about those
Minimal. Okay.
fairly minimal costs to be able to keep that going. And I'll say that if Brentwood were to continue to have a program on its own for football, its equipment would need to be updated and would be a significant cost.
Okay. And this also incorporates a JV team as
Yes.
well? Okay, and so that you would take that into account when you're scheduling things, okay.
Absolutely.
What is the MISA deadline to do something like this?
They don't have a set hard deadline. Usually you want to have it soon enough that the spring, the programs can get together and start doing their off-season programs. In the spring, they're allowed to do off-season conditioning, summer programs. They would also want to combine to be able to do some of that off-season workouts, 7-on-7. So there isn't a set timeline for it, but I would say by February or March, you'd want to start having the coaching staff set so that they can start to have that communication with the kids.
Yeah, I mean, Clayton was bringing it to their board this month,
Yeah.
and I told them I would bring it to our board this month, just because even though we've had a lot of discussion, and I think we've really thought this out well, you know, it's just logistical issues from here on out that we'll continue to hammer out, but.
So one thing that we talked about, I think last summer with transportation, to make sure our VIC students can come to maybe not the mandatory practices, but the alternates that would be available. Is that something we're gonna still work on this summer to get them to the Clayton extra activities? In
Yeah,
the summertime, we could do this.
What you actually need to work on for that with Vic is not saying things are not mandatory. When it's mandatory, they could provide that transportation. When it's voluntary,
Okay.
that's when it becomes more of an issue. So, yes.
Everything's
thinking
We're
about it.
figuring out how to work around that.
Yes.
Okay. And then, does Misha usually approve these co-ops? Is there any concern that they
Yeah, I
wouldn't,
haven't
or?
heard them. I've heard of them stopping co-ops that make a co-op too large,
Okay.
only a couple of times. I have not heard of them downing anything else. They know this is an issue. Like I said, at the discussion today, with all the regional ADs, that was actually brought up that for 10 years it's declining, and the reason it's declining is schools are either leaving because they don't have enough, and usually schools our size or smaller are the ones that are leaving because they just can't survive with them, or they're having more and more co-ops in football. You actually see on our schedule this past year, is it 4 or 5 of the schools we played were co-ops.
Okay.
It's a pretty common thing now with small schools.
Mhm. Okay.
So when the games don't start till 7 or 7:30 on a Friday night, are we going to provide transportation right after school for those kids, and they're going to be over at Clayton, or what's gonna happen? Because it used to be they'd go to people's houses until the game started. So what are we gonna do with that time frame? It's just something to think about, I
The
guess.
players on game day,
Mhm.
they're gonna probably still do the same thing that they've been doing. They'll have a pregame meal, which is usually by 4 o'clock. So within the hour after school, after having their meal, then they run through a little bit of just pregame walkthroughs. They're usually out on the field, starting out on the field by 5:30. Football has an extended amount of time before.
Yeah, there's very little, game days was not the issue, it was practice days, where you get hanging out time.
And the practices will be right after.
Practice will be right after school.
Has the bus nightmare improved at all? Are we concerned
For-
about what's gonna happen to
Well,
the?
this is Vic, that we would, and that's what we were specific in looking at that. Vic will always have to have a bus at Clayton to be able to transfer their kids at the end of school, so.
It's pretty nice the way it's that was our big concern, was transportation. And we came up with a really good option where basically it's, the Clayton bus was coming out anyway, and it literally will just veer off for about a mile, and that's our response. Our only payment will be literally for that mile of veering off. Picks up our kids, including our resident kids, if they want to hop on that bus as well. Takes them over to Gayfield, and then the Vic kids will of course get a ride home at night, as they always do. Our resident kids will have to find their way home from Gayfield, as we've typically done, from various places.
Mark Twain or anywhere else.
Yeah.
Brentwood Park, wherever you end up practicing.
So just one last question, I know we spent a tremendous amount of money, in renovating our weight room. How will that be continued to be utilized for the football program or other programs, after school, before school? I guess what is the vision there? Because, you know, when kids are working out together, you're forming a good bond, you get to know each other. Kind of curious to get your thoughts.
Actually, our weight room still stays as active as it would have been.
Okay.
Programs can be given to kids to be able to do on their own, but you're right, you also want to have these things to be together. And their weight facilities that they utilize in season are the ones down at the field. They don't utilize that during the school year. We could definitely work on a program that goes back and forth between the two weight rooms to do exactly that. I've talked to the AD at Clayton extensively about this. We have to make sure that this is a feeling of these kids are together and not separate.
Right.
So we would prefer not to have kids over here working out, kids over here working out, but, all right, Monday and Tuesday we're gonna work out over here, and Wednesday, Thursday we're gonna work out over here.
Okay.
That's great. Any more questions for Dr. Aya? All right, just all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is approved. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work on that, Dr. Ayat. Exciting. Next up, we have Dr. Chambers is going to talk to us about our employee climate survey and those results and some of the work that we've been doing since then with those results. Or she can talk about a football co-op. Are you comfortable with that?
Of course. Sure.
Multi-talented.
All right, good evening. Thanks for having me today to give you an update on our staff engagement survey that went out. As you know, earlier this year, this survey went out to staff, students, and parents. I'm going to focus specifically on the survey that went out to our staff this year. Last year, Missouri Department of Education, DESE, allocated funding to all school districts across Missouri to really give a focus on staff retention. I'm sure you see, in the news, as we look at trends nationwide, we have a growing concern of keeping employees in our schools, keeping the teacher retention rate, as well as looking at college students that are going into studying to be teachers. We're seeing a decline nationally. Some of the research coming out says usually we look at teacher turnover at about a 16% nationwide turnover rate. But we're looking historically at a spike of about up to 25% of a retention rate in the profession. And so what that means for us as educators is really looking at what it is that we're doing very intentionally to ensure that we're retaining staff in our district. As I said, DESE allocated funding for each district across the state. And so what we did some research on looking at companies that were focused on the retention of staff in schools. And Upbeat is a company that we had previously introduced. This company is based only in schools, so educational environments, and looking at these 23 research-based categories that impact the levels of retention in schools across the nation. I wrote a grant to allocate our funding so that we could utilize our funding to address the results of surveys that are given out 2 times a year to all of our staff in 3 different categories, and I'll tell you about those categories in a minute. But we really wanted to get a hold of how our staff here in Brentwood is feeling about their engagement in these 23 areas. So as we go through this, I'll give you a little rundown. So there were 3 different surveys that were given out. It was the same survey given, but there were some words that were changed, categorized by the language used to describe the position within the organization. So all of our faculty and teachers received a survey. Staff received a similar survey, but there may have been some unique words that were changed, such as instead of principal, it may say supervisor. And then the department, all department staff was also given a survey. Again, the same categories, but a few nuanced words that made change based on the position itself. So every employee in the district, including our special education employees, were given an opportunity to take this survey. Under faculty and teachers, the individuals that took that survey are certified teachers, interventionists, and social service workers, so counselors, social workers. Our staff, what was categorized as staff, were nurses, instructional support aides, paraprofessionals, building office staff, and our instructional coaches. And then our department employees were characterized as anyone that was in the custodial department, maintenance department, financial department, or technology department. So you can see the overall participation rate here was very similar. It changed as you look at each category. So our highest involvement in completing the survey was our certified faculty and teacher staff at 92%, and to the staff in the middle at 73%, and 50% of our department survey. Our department employees took the survey. Overall engagement scores, you can see, are very similar, have a pretty close range. What you're looking at is the overall results of engagement for each subgroup of employees, and then it's followed by the national comparative group average. So when we got our results back, we were compared nationally to school districts of similar size, similar demographics across the nation. So all of these results that we received, not only did we, because at this point we only have one survey, at the end of the year we'll be able to compare ourselves to ourselves, but at this point our only comparative factor was school districts in similar size and makeup.
Katie, can I ask you just a quick question? Were administrators also surveyed in this? Was it like all staff, central office administrators as well, or?
So they were not. They were not, and I'm not sure if you got the questions of the survey, but the survey questions spoke specifically around leadership moves.
Okay.
And so for faculty and teachers, many of the questions were specific to principals. Some were specific to central office. The staff, depending on whether it was special education staff or office staff, it may say principal, it might say director. The department staff specifically spoke of supervisors when it asked the questions around just the overall engagement.
Okay, thank you.
What does the engagement score represent? 65% represents what?
So as we go forward, or I'll go back a little, so essentially that overall engagement, each of these categories had numerous questions that spoke specific to that category. And then that averaged out a rate, and so we're looking at the overall engagement of all categories.
So 98 faculty staff filled it out, but of the 98, they only filled out 65% of those questions.
So no, they completed the whole survey, but the rate of feeling engaged in all of those areas rated at 65%.
So 100% means what? I'm fully engaged, I love the place?
Yes.
And was it geared building by building or district-wide?
Building by building as well, so we received the result district-wide, and then we could disaggregate those results by building, we could disaggregate those results by grouping, we could disaggregate by any demographics that we wanted to break the data down.
Yeah, and you'll see here in a little bit as Dr. Chambers gets into it, that, we identified 3 district areas of focus on those metrics. But then in addition, each building principal had 2 focus areas that were identified for their particular building, and they were working on those.
Just a clarifying question on the percentage. So am I assuming correctly, like a 50% would be, they're kind of status quo, neither here, neither engaged or not engaged, but anything above that 50% is they're slightly engaged? you know, or was it on a scale of like 1 to 5 and they had to choose, or 1 to 6?
Yes, and so as we looked at that, we also looked at the comparative average. So I'll go into
Okay.
kind of the process that we follow to use a data team around the information.
Okay.
Because there were some areas that, you know, we saw maybe a very low rate, for example, and we'll get there in a minute, but, you know, 50% when we look at diversity of staff. So
Okay.
very, you know, mediocre, you know,
Yeah, just-
not very engaged.
Mhm.
But then when we look at the national average, we saw a similar comparative rate. So we talked about what are the things we're doing to address that, but it may not have been such a high priority as something that was 50% and maybe we were 20% under the comparative rate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is what we did, the work that we did, the central office team engaged in a data dive to determine the decisions around what we were going to do for each subgroup of employees. So we looked at each subgroup individually because they each had their own survey. This group made and refined observations. We looked at patterns, trends, what we expected, what we didn't expect, and then where we had opportunities to really impact the results, where we have an opportunity to further and more deeply engage our employees within the specific areas that they spoke to. We developed a goal area and action plan for each subgroup. So I say this is a central office, like district-wide level. The second piece of it, to the point that was asked earlier, each building principal looked specifically at their own building results. And they worked with an external coach who used to be a superintendent and principal, somebody that works for Upbeat, to receive individualized coaching to establish goals and work with their team. So there was some leadership coaching on the level of each building principal to address their unique needs to their building. As a district, we also wanted to kind of gauge district-wide what is our big picture. So what we're going to look at now is this is kind of the results of the big picture, not specifically unique to each building because their needs and priorities may have been a little different based on what the employees in their building stated. So we're going to start with looking at some of the highlights. So when we look at, I'm just going to run through some numbers and highlights. 94% of our certified staff felt that my school provides the instructional materials that I need, which was 8% higher than the national norm of similar sized districts. 97% of the same group of staff felt that the work that they do each day has a lasting impact on students, also above the national mean. So our certified staff, those were some real strong highlights for them. For our instructional support staff, so now we're talking our paraprofessionals, nurses, and any support staff, office staff, 90% of them felt confident that they can maintain the daily workload for the long term, and which was 5.9% higher than the national group, and 93% could see themselves working at least the next school year in the same building. So again, some similar areas with that instructional support staff. Our overall department staff, so this is our facilities, custodial staff, technology department, and finance, showed 100% able to balance the workload with other responsibilities, which was 15.4% higher than the national trend, and 92 felt that they had access to high-quality materials and tools to do their jobs. So these were some areas that were some pretty strong highlights that the team pulled out. Some areas that we had questions about, and as we unpacked it, we realized we were already kind of doing some actions to address that. Our professional development, when we looked at the questions and the breakdown of professional development, we saw that there were some real opportunities only specifically highlighting with our new teachers. So that was something that we could take away and look at our new teacher professional development and really look at how we're impacting that. Recruiting, onboarding, and hiring. In that area, we noticed trended stronger with our new hires and support staff. So we've implemented some new practices with our onboarding of new staff, and we saw that there was a difference between those new staff that had been hired within the last couple of years and those that had been previously hired, so pretty strong differential. So we identified that there are some things that we have changed that we feel like will continue to make an impact on new staff. Compensation was low across the board. It also trended nationally as low across the board. One area that we felt that we can take a look at with the compensation is really looking at our support staff. And, are we providing opportunities for our support staff for tuition reimbursement or for seeking advancement in their studies so that they can be better equipped to support the needs of the school? So that is something that we're starting to talk about and look at. And then finally, diversity, as I mentioned before, was low for certified staff. We are working on building a climate of inclusion with the leadership team. As Dr. Hostetler and I presented with the equity committee, we're diving into addressing some of our equity, inclusion, diversity goals, which really right now is at the level of leadership training. So we're doing that work collaboratively with Special School District. We also looked at the varied recruitment efforts that we are showing a change in the demographic makeup of our district as a whole based on some varied recruitment efforts into various platforms that we had used previously. So those were kind of what we broke down as far as the data. I'm now going to go into some areas for growth, as Dr. Lane explained, that we identified one goal to address each of those subgroups of employees. So what we noticed and identified for our certified staff, that an area for growth of us is in school safety and order. It was low in the certified staff, and it was also mentioned as a high priority for staff, students, and families when we calibrated the surveys that we did for everyone. There was an open-ended version that went out, and this was something that rose to the top. So I'll show you in a minute what our goal is and then what are the action steps that we're going to take.
And real quick on that one, it's interesting because when we really looked at the questions around school safety and order and the responses to it, it wasn't, at least my original thought is, oh, this is going to be, about physical barriers to the building or access controls or, bulletproof this and that. And it isn't. What it was coming from the staff was more about, consistent handling of discipline referrals or how discipline was handled in other classrooms other than their own across the district, or their feelings about that. So that's kind of the background on that.
As far as our instructional support staff, employee voice and leadership trended very closely with autonomy for this group of individuals. So again, this is our office staff, nurses. The efficacy was high with the group. So as a team, we determined that if we really focus on working on identifying individual strengths and how we're utilizing those individual strengths when we're engaged in decision making, as a leadership team, that we believe that we can impact that area for that group of employees. And then finally, when we look at our department staff and looked at the data of that, so again, this is our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, technology and facilities staff. We identified that care and commitment trended really closely with that employee voice and leadership for that department staff. So we feel that improving the use of a formalized evaluation system so we can really highlight the areas of expertise of those individuals and be able to give that ongoing feedback, and then really work on that team building, we feel that that would make an impact on that with that group of employees. So from that, we identified the areas and then we went to our goals. We created SMART goals, and here's some of the action steps that as a district leadership team that we're engaging to impact these group of employees based on the feedback that they gave us in this survey. So with our faculty, again, our certified staff, the goal with intentional efforts to collaborate and examine our school discipline processes, we believe that we can have an impact on that percentage from that group of employees. So Dr. Lane is facilitating principal collaboration around examining district-wide discipline data, streamlining our reporting and feedback loop for student incidents and discipline referrals, and then really starting to talk about as a district what are our universal behavioral expectations. So that's work that Dr. Lane is leading the principal group through so that we can have an impact on the sense of safety and order that our certified staff feel across the district.
Excuse me, just one
Yeah.
quick question. So you mentioned the baseline score, that's the score that, that we have today. What is the national average score?
Of the school safety and order.
Is that one 71?
And so I just asked because you know, it's a SMART goal, so what is like the
Sure.
specific target that you're going after? Is it to meet the national average?
Well, so at this point, we really want to make an improvement with our own. I mean,
Sure.
You know, we want to implement something that's going to impact how our employees feel today
Yep.
versus intentional efforts taken by the leaders across the district to how do they feel in 6 months from now.
Sure.
When there's an impact. So that I didn't write down the national average of those.
That's okay,
But
it's
I
just a
think-
point of clarification.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I
like,
can get it.
Are
I
we
can get
driving
that.
towards the national average, or are we already at the national average and we're gonna be driving towards something higher, which I would hope that we don't strive for average, we're striving for.
Yeah, I think our long-term goals with this upbeat survey is, of course, yeah, we would be higher than the national average across the board. I think since this is our first opportunity with it, yeah, our focus is on growth, and then I think we'll
Of
see
course.
what's a reasonable amount of growth that we could obtain here in the next, you know, basically 4 months, but yeah.
So we were 12.3% lower than the national
Okay.
on that one.
So,
I did, yeah. I did
76,
that.
yeah,
So-
that's why I'm asking the question is, you know, the SMART goal is we're striving to achieve something, and this is how we're gonna measure our success on that. So improving where we're at baseline, of course, right? But
Sure.
what's the goal?
What's our end game?
Yes.
Yep, no, great question. So, okay, so the instructional support, nurses and social services, again, this was in that area of employee voice and leadership. And so, again, our baseline score of 60, we believe that we will have an impact on that with the intentional efforts to collaborate with staff in making decisions. So really making sure that we have collective voices around the table in regard to any decision-making that's happening, and then empowering employees to lead based on his or their unique strengths. So really knowing our individual strengths of each of our employees and utilizing those strengths and leaning into those strengths of those employees to be decision makers around the table, or at least be thought partners around the table in whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. So the way that some actions that we feel that we're going to take on this, and again, Dr. Lane's going to guide the leadership team through a book study regarding building capacity of staff through collaboration. We're still exploring right now some possible book topics around that area. Establish a decision-making protocol to ensure intentional efforts of employee voice. So again, that may be something as simple as, you know, a few questions that anytime a leader in our district is thinking about making a decision, who will it impact, how will it, you know, what will be possible unintended consequences, positive outcomes. So some kind of decision-making protocol so that we're ensuring that we are taking time to pause and get the right voices around the table. And then engaging in intentional spotlighting of employees each month. So being really intentional, and this is through our communications department, of who we're spotlighting each month and how we're ensuring that we are highlighting employees that may not always be in the spotlight, and so that we can just elevate and know more about our employees that we serve. And then finally, when we look at our department staff, facilities, finance, technology, again, we highlighted care and commitment was an area that we can, an opportunity for growth. And so we are focused on engaging that group of employees in team building, very intentional team building efforts, and highlighting the strengths and talents of the individuals. So being able to recognize through an evaluation process that there's individual growth and that employees can set goals and achieve those goals with our support as an organization. So I'll be working with the leaders of those 3 departments, facilities, facilities, finance, and technology to really examine and look at the evaluation process that we have for our current support staff, get input from our support staff, see if it's validating, if it's recognizing their efforts and their expertise. There's a book called The Catalyst Effect, 12 Skills and Behaviors to Boost Your Impact and Elevate Team Performance. So that team of leaders will be going through that book study on how we're building our collaborative team effort and our collective efficacy toward our department goals. And then again, that intentional spotlighting of employees each month. So our communications department will be focused on highlighting the talents and validating the expertise that we have across the district. So that, and then this was already mentioned, Dr. Lane talked about the leadership goal alignment. So that is at a district level. That's a very broad level of how we're looking overall at these 3 employee groups. As we stated earlier, each principal obtained the same results specific to their building that they could disaggregate and doing ongoing work for 3 months with a coach who is guiding them through developing goals. Our Brentwood School District administrators, as part of our comprehensive evaluation plan that is outlined in policy, each of our administrators develop an individual growth plan every year. That is part of our evaluation process, and so they now have data that they can use from this survey, so they can incorporate this data as part of their plan for professional growth as a leader as to how they're going to impact the engagement of employees. We know that there's a teacher crisis, and it's even more so when we look at our classified staff when it comes to recruiting and retaining, and it's going to take an effort of every leader in the district working together to ensure that the experience and that the engagement that employees have in the district keep them here. So that is a rundown of our upbeat survey and employee engagement.
So you mentioned this was for the staff. Similar survey, I know I filled out to the parents. Are we gonna get similar, have you guys gone through this and looked at that, or no, where are we?
Yeah, we've reviewed all the parent and student data. That could be a conversation. We wanted to start with focusing around, because one of our primary goals has been around employee recruitment and retention.
So in the past, we used to get the spreadsheets with all the answers so that we could see them. I don't know how anybody else feels, but I'd like to see the answers to the surveys from the kids and the parents and the teachers. The other thing is, when you talk about discipline, like we as a board, there's one of the things that we do is we set policy and procedure. When you're saying you're going to collaborate and examine our school discipline processes, I think it's important for us as a board, because we set a lot of these policies, to be able to see this data so that this goes hand in hand. We need to see what is not clear in our policies, or what do we need to do, and possibly changing our policies for discipline or for all these different things. So I think
Yeah,
sharing this data would be very helpful.
if there's any policy ramifications, I'll bring it to the board. I don't anticipate these are policy discussions.
So we won't be seeing any of the questions, or the answers to any of these questions?
A lot of it gets down into personnel, so that would have to be a conversation. If I'm asked by 4 board members, I'll provide it.
Is there much of a unanimous or? Right?
Anonymous.
Anonymous, yeah, not unanimous. Anonymous?
Yeah, it's all
Yeah,
anonymous.
that's what I thought, right?
Between the schools, because you said you could use the fancy educator word that I'd never heard before, and used it a couple times. So I knew, but I figured out what it meant, but I was trying to recall the word, and I can't.
Yes, to disaggregate.
Yes,
break,
yes,
break
look
it
at that.
down by
Yeah, it's like,
race,
okay, I feel
gender.
stupid right now. So, was there much of a delta between the schools? Because you said you could look at it, so like, on some of these that were bigger issues, did one of the schools score at 30%, but one of the schools was at 80%, and it kind of dragged it to, like, even getting to the, if one of the schools, they're 80% engaged, should we really be using, not that we shouldn't be doing all the same stuff, but maybe they had issues that were a little bit, pressing. So I didn't know if we're looking at it at that micro of a level as well at the schools.
So that's a great question. So as part of the data team process, what we did is everyone around the table had a different spreadsheet. It was a heat map that they were looking at. So so one person was looking at the school-to-school differential, one person was looking at gender, one person was looking at race. And so we could really pull as much information as we could to make decisions around globally, where do we see a global need? Versus where do we see that this is really popping in one spot, which already popped out at that school, so that became a part of that building unique plan for that individual leader to really dive into.
Okay, so there's each principal has been given not only do we see this as a global school district thing, we want you to, at your school, you also need to focus on these.
100%, yep.
Yeah,
And
we
it
would,
did
we
vary
would
by
see,
school.
yeah, we would see a few areas where it was, it might be, collaboration, but it was really frankly, at one of the buildings, and the other ones, those scores were fine, so that was going to be a building goal, and it didn't make sense for a district.
And that's, I just making sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, great question.
And
Yeah.
I think, back on your point there, Keith, is marrying that data up with the data from the parents and the students as well. And are we seeing a correlation there? Because I think that really tells a very compelling story on where we should be pinpoint and focused on.
Building by building.
Building, right,
Yeah.
building by building.
And then you said each building has a prior superintendent.
So there's a coach, so as part of the Upbeat program, not only do they facilitate and do a data dashboard of the data for us, and they send out the emails so that it's all anonymous, because we really want staff to feel that they can be, honest and transparent about their engagement in the district. But in addition to that, which is what made Upbeat a company that we really felt like was going to help move us forward, is that individualized coaching with somebody who has been in the field, who works for Upbeat, and then there are reports that come back to the superintendent as to what it is, what are the goals, what have they talked about, what are some strategies and tools that have been given to each of the leaders, department or principal leaders, to support their continued intentional efforts on impacting the data.
Now,
Oh, I was just gonna say, is that something that the board would be able to receive, that the progress that has been made in a period of time within each building? So if they had some goals set, here are some changes that were implemented, and here's what we're seeing now, is that information that could be presented back to the board after the next survey is done, or at an appropriate time, so that we can see either we're moving the needle by making some changes, or we're still stuck in this spot and we need to do something different. Is that something, Brian, that?
Oh, yeah. I think that would be appropriate. We would do an update once we go through this a second time, and we can show some areas that, the progress and or lack of progress in those key areas.
Now, do you guys as well, because you've put this out, and then you're getting the data, and then you're getting people to help our different buildings administrators, but then you're also left with this huge task as well. Do you have someone that you're bringing into this building who was a prior superintendent or a prior person in your positions, that can then also be someone that engages with you and helps you decipher and direct and facilitate this?
So as part of the Upbeat, that it is really a building-based leadership focus as far as coaching. Now, we did receive kind of an overall, we all came together and they gave us an overall kind of training on the system. But that's why we felt it was critical as a team of leaders that we unpacked and went through. It's Nancy Love is the researcher around a data team process. We used a very specific data team process to unpack the data so that we didn't have the holes and gaps that were brought up earlier. So we utilized that process to come to some goals, which is a well-researched process. Now, as far as like guiding us through the next steps, we're working collaboratively as a team to kind of move the needle on some of those pieces, which is why it was critical that there were tangible action steps that we believe would have some results.
I guess one, I was super impressed that the faculty, certified staff is at 92%. But I wonder, at 50%, and can we, should this number really be like 40% or 30? Because if I don't fill out the survey, I'm certainly not engaged in the school, I like that the 12 people that filled it out felt 50%, actually I hate that they only felt 50% engaged, but I'm glad they filled it out. The lack of data is also an alarming thing to me, that half of that staff does not feel engaged enough or to actually fill out the survey. I mean, I'd like, if everyone's really interested in the school getting better, I'd like to see these numbers at 100%. You can't say I care about the school being better and then not fill out the survey. You can't sit back in the back of the classroom or the back of the lunchroom and complain that the district doesn't listen to us, they don't do anything, but then when we try to do something, you don't fill it out, and we, 27% hold there, 8% of the, I just look and say 50%. I know when I send out stuff, most times if they don't answer, maybe there's not a problem and they're just like, but I feel that these numbers could skew lower because the people that are already angry and are gonna say, well, they're not gonna do anything about it anyway, even if I fill this thing out, so I'm not going to. So I guess, long speech there to say, are we going to do something to try to help? And I mean, you probably sent it to their email 75 times to try to get them to fill out. Is there anything we can do? I mean, I'm not trying to say incentivize them, but maybe if they see we're making an effort, that they will see
And that's
that.
the hope.
It's a great point.
I think there's also just thinking about an equity barrier there, and it was something that that we asked about initially, is in regard to just the format of it being digital. Not all of our staff regularly utilize digital means to communicate, and so we did ask if there was any way that we could work around that. Could we provide paper surveys? And for the fidelity of their company's process, that was not an option for us. So that may also be a factor, just in that access, which is a problem in and of itself, right?
yeah, could we, set aside a time for the custodial staff and say, we have the survey we'd like you to fill out. I have the computer logged up. We're gonna pay you for this
Great.
half an hour. Come please fill out this survey.
I love that.
And then you do the same with support staff, and you set aside time and say, we'd like you to fill, we have the computer, we have a whole room of computers set up, come fill them out, and.
I love that. Yeah.
How long does it take to do it? How many questions are there?
So the company averaged about 14 to 16 minutes. Again, I didn't take it, so I'm not sure.
Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah, so the hope was, that it was something that was a click-through, first gut feel to answer the questions.
There were 23 categories, and I assume there were like 20 questions per category or something.
No, there was, there's about 2, so it was a quick.
Thank
All right, so the long-term plan, once we do the second version of this, we'll report back to the board on
Thank you.
those
Yeah,
results.
thank you.
Thank you very much,
Great
Karen. Thank
questions.
you.
Thanks for-
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, Dr. Chambers gets to stay up at the microphone, and Dr. Triphammer, they have been working diligently together to take a hard look at our staffing, and they have a few moving parts we've been working on that ultimately I think are going to be a real plus for the district, so.
Thanks for letting us visit with you this evening. We're here to make a recommendation, excuse me, to add a position called the secondary math interventionist. This is very similar to what we have at the elementary schools that we added a couple years ago. It's really a continuation of our work in what we call MTSS, a multi-tiered system of supports. Quite frankly, we've really started working with our friends from Mizzou to really establish a really good process at the elementary level, and really feel it's like time to move this on to the secondary level. I think we have enough data at both the elementary and the secondary level that kind of nudges us in this direction. What we're seeing is pretty good results, actually really good results from our kiddos that are receiving interventions at the elementary level. And on the other hand, what we are also seeing is at our secondary level in our math and EOC scores, we're seeing a lot of kids that are falling in that basic and below basic level that probably could benefit from someone with a real strong expertise in the area of mathematics. So I think we may have shared a memo with you that outlines a few other bullet points, but that's really the gist, is that we see this as critical to our work in supporting all kids. If we want to point back to our mission statement of personalizing education, when we talk about an interventionist that can specifically meet the specific needs of kids in a specific content area, we start to move that needle just a little bit more. And I think the only other piece I would add is that this is not just a middle school position, this would go into high school, most likely capping at Algebra 1. Typically, once kids move beyond that Algebra 1 course, especially in pre-calc and calc, the interventions, we don't need as much support for intervention work at that level, but certainly what we've noticed in Algebra 1, we certainly do have a pocket of students that would benefit from some really good guided support in math.
Katie, did you want to talk to the staffing pieces, or you want me to talk to why this is a cost-neutral proposition?
So as we look at our attrition and we're moving into one building, we're looking at all the staffing across the board, looking at nursing staffing and all the certifications of our staff across the board. We know there's going to be some adjustments. So it looks to be that this is going to be a fairly cost neutral. Now we do take in mind that some, are certified staff versus, we also have the support staff, so there's some salary differential there that we're looking at. But when we're looking at position, FTE positions, we're really moving into a place that it's not going to be adding additional FTE as a whole when we look at the district.
So I move that we approve the establishment of the secondary math interventionist.
Second.
Discussion?
So this is a position for one FTE, or this is a position that we potentially would have multiple people? Or this cost neutrality is based on one person?
One, which we believe would meet that need.
And that's sufficient?
Are we going to try to get this higher in this year, or is this?
Well,
Yes,
this would be for the 23-24 school.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if we
Oh,
were trying
I
to
see.
see.
Because we'd be
anything.
looking at a math certified, middle school math certified individual, and then ideally looking at their experience all the way up through algebra, when we're looking at the qualifications of higher.
Yes, we'd like to post this soon if approved, and then it would be for the coming school year.
So just the connecting dots, so I think it was last meeting, right? Dr. you shared NWEA and ACT and all that. So is this particular cohort, or you've noticed over time through the cohorts, the 6th through 8th grade needs here?
It's funny you should ask. Actually, when I first came into the district 7 years ago, one of my tasks as part of my interview was to examine map data. And I can tell you 7 years ago, for whatever reason, there's been a historical dip in our middle school performance. No lack of effort on our teachers, and they've got great kids, but this might be a piece that might have been missing to support those kids' needs. It's been, I guess to answer your question, it's kind of been a historical kind of blip on the radar screen.
Well, and then over the past 3 or 4 years, their scores have risen, but where we're really concerned is we still got that pocket of basic and below
That's the
basic
one.
students that we're not moving out of those areas. So while the overall numbers that you might see, or you saw the ones, second in St. Louis County and things of that nature, those look good, but we still got that pocket of kids that we're not moving out of that lower tier.
And just so I'm clear, because interventionist, I don't know, has a certain connotation, it's not, because we're trying to accelerate some math for those that are capable. This is more focused on those that are lower on the scores. This is not, do you know what I mean?
But because we have a small student population, there could be opportunities to provide some enrichment, much like our elementary folks are able to do.
Yeah,
Particularly-
there's enrichment specifically in the job description, so that's gonna be part of our
So there would be
expectation.
enrichment, so particularly given our math path that we did, right, potentially those kids that are close, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
any
you.
more questions for Dr. Chambers? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Thank you all.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. That's exciting.
Yeah, they worked very hard to make this happen, so I appreciate it. And that ends the superintendent report.
All right. All right, that brings us into our Board of Education report. We have the Missouri Ethics Committee annual filers notification. Kate.
It's, you should have, or you should be getting something from MEC if you haven't filed already. And it's just a reminder that you've got to file for 2022. And it's due, I think, by May.
Ethics Commission, if
Kate, that's what I sent you, right?
Yes,
Okay.
some folks have already done it. So,
You have until May 1st. All right, that moves us into MSBA delegate report. Keith, do you have any updates for us?
Nothing much going on. You'll start getting the emails from MSBA about things going on in the legislature since I'm starting up again. If you see anything that you think we should all be interested in, let us know or let me know. I find those things interesting and annoying, but anyway.
Okay, great. Those come every Friday to your email. Board committee updates. So I will just mention we did have some citizens apply to be on our board advisory committees. We have 2 of those, finance and facilities, communication and curriculum. And we have 7 community members that will be joining us. That communication has gone out to them, that they were selected and approved for our committees, and central office will be, and staff will be working to set up an initial meeting with each of our committees with our new community members in February. We have an introduction to being part of the advisory committees. So other committee updates, all right. And upcoming events, you'll see on our calendar, policy and business meetings at the very end. To put on your calendar, March 30th at 9:30 is our senior citizens brunch at the new McGrath, which is back this year, so very great.
And we moved the regular meeting in March a week.
Spring break,
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
gotta go to the beach and party, Keith.
I can't do that.
All right, so if I could have a motion to adjourn. to
I
closed
move that we
session.
adjourn and move into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda.
Second.
All right, roll call, please, Kate.
Jamie Allen?
Yes.
Ryan Flynn?
Yes.
Chris Perkins?
Yes.
Keith Ravenberg?
Yes.
Keith Slesser?
Yes.
Lindsey Spencer?
Yes.
Carrie Trust?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you all.
coming.